Welcome to the Snapshot Testimony podcast. I'm your host, Allie Domerson. In this podcast, I ask my guests to share one pivotal moment that helped shape their faith in Christ. In this episode, you'll meet Dawn, a beautiful wife, mom, and grandma, and a Christ follower. No one could see the crushing shame and regret she carried from an abortion she had as a teenager, but it touched nearly every area of her life until the moment she took a reluctant step of faith and let God into the place in her heart that she'd kept locked away for so long. I pray you'll listen to this episode with an open heart, especially if you're living under your own weight of shame and wonder if it's possible to ever be free from it. Here's a snapshot testimony from Dawn. Tell me what was going on in your life in your teenage years.
Well, in my teenage years, let's see, I was dating this boy who I thought I was in love with, that kind of thing at 16. And we were together for almost a year, having sex. I was not a Christian at this time and wound up pregnant. There was a lot of abuse in my home, so I was looking at it as, yay, I can get out of my house. I'm going to have a baby and he's going to love me and the baby. And that was not the case whatsoever.
So your initial reaction was excitement
Yes.
about getting
Yes.
pregnant.
Yes.
Okay.
I thought it was a way of escape from my home because of the abuse and everything that was happening. I thought it would be a new start for me. And I thought he would be my rescuer and get me out of there and we would just live happily ever after.
And that's not what happened.
Not at all.
When did things start to shift from excitement to something else?
I told him and he wasn't as excited about it as I was. He was an Italian Catholic and thought that his family would just kick him out and not be happy and we would bring disgrace to him and his family. And then we decided to tell my parents and that didn't go over very well either. It was disgrace brought upon my family. How dare a 16-year-old wind up pregnant? And so it was really my parents were the pushing drive to get the abortion.
How did they tell you that? Just that frank? We think you need to do this, or
Yes.
What was that conversation like?
It was not a very good conversation. It was basically, this is what you're going to do because we cannot have anybody in our family, any of our friends find out that you're pregnant. And so it was actually my mom and my boyfriend that drove me to the abortion clinic.
Did you get to the point before the procedure that you wanted it? Did you go all the way through it thinking, I don't want to do this?
I tried fighting it. I tried asking them to let me save the baby, and they were like, no. I had 3 people against me, and I just felt so alone. And basically, my mom and boyfriend dropped me off at the abortion clinic. I was alone. And I even woke up during the abortion and I could hear the vacuum. And it was just so traumatic. And then afterwards, they picked me up and it was never talked about. My family never brought it up. I was so angry at my boyfriend that within a week, I couldn't even stand his face. So I broke up with him. And my parents never took me to counseling, never discussed it. And so I was into drinking at 16 and for the next few years got into drinking and drugs. I think it was my way of hiding the pain and not feeling things but numbing.
Yeah. Did you think about the baby often?
For the first few years, I didn't, but what wound up happening is at 19, I wound up pregnant again, this time with my now husband. We've been together since high school. But after I had my first child, when she turned a year, it started to hit me, oh man, my baby would have been 4 this year. And so each year upon her birthday, I would think about how old that baby would have been. And this year, that child would have been 40. And the problem that I was facing was my husband knew about the abortion, but we never talked about it. I got saved at 21. And even though the Lord saved me and forgave me for all my other sins, that was the one sin that I thought He would never forgive me for. And so I just stuffed it down. And each year around my daughter's birthday, I would just cry myself to sleep for a week because I was in so much pain thinking that I did what I did to that baby and how old they would have been. And you know, Allie, once I had grandchildren, that's when it really hit me that I got rid of generations. Like I loved my 4 grandchildren so much. And to think that I could have had more grandchildren. And I prevented that. So I lived with that for 38 years, up until 2 years ago when the Lord set me free from the shackles of shame and regret.
Oh. Did you ever share with anyone how heavy a burden you were carrying because of this?
My husband knew, but he didn't know how to help me.
Yeah.
We had gone through marriage counseling and we never brought it up. And after I became a Christian and raised my children, I had told them that they had an older sibling that died. They knew about the abortion. Um, and there was so much shame there too, just telling your children that they had an older sibling that is no more. That was hard.
Yeah. So what did the Lord do in your life 2 years ago? Because I mean, the enemy is so good
Oh, so good.
at keeping us hiding and at making us believe lies. I mean, the as you were believing the lie that God could never forgive this one,
Hmm.
that the price paid on the cross for all sins doesn't cover this one. And
Right.
so that lie that just rattled around in your mind and caused so much pain and shame for so many years, the enemy is just so cruel.
Hmm.
How did the Lord release you from that and help you see the truth?
Well, I told you I had abuse in my past, so I've been in trauma counseling with a Christian counselor, and we were working through the trauma. And the one day, the abortion came out, and she said, "Oh, we have to work on this." She goes, "You are not free from any guilt or shame." She goes, "You're holding that so tightly and in such a private spot." She goes, "You have to let Jesus in there."
Mm.
I was like, mm-mm, that's one spot I do not want Jesus to see.
Had anyone ever told you that before? Like,
Mm-mm.
kind of, like, pressed you to, like,
No,
"Let's go there"?
no,
No.
I wouldn't. Even if they did tell me, I think I would have not gone there anyway.
Mhm.
But because of the healing that he was already doing in my trauma,
Yeah.
that this was just one more step for complete healing.
Okay. So
And
what did that look like
ugh,
when
I'm
she
a,
was like, "Okay, we're gonna do this." What did it look like?
I was scared, but I'm a very visual person. So, and she knows that. So she would have me close my eyes and she had me picture Jesus standing in front of me with his hands stretched out, asking me to turn that over. And I'll be honest, 3 times I kept saying, "No, I can't go there. I can't give that to you. It's just so dirty and so dark. I can't let you see it." And he just looked at me and said one more time, "You need to give this to me. Otherwise, you will not have healing. You will not be free." and I paid the price to set you free. And so the vision was me holding like an hourglass full of sand, and each sand represented my tears and the pain and the heartbreak. And he just held out his hands and he said, pour it. And so I trusted him and I poured it, and the holes in his hands opened up and the sand went through
Mm.
and hit the ground and disappeared. And after I was done pouring all that sand, he said to me, daughter, your faith has healed you. So from Mark 5, where he talks to the girl that was bleeding all those years,
Yeah.
and he said, your suffering is no more. And it was like instant healing and instant freeness. I just felt like it was off my shoulders and I could breathe. I could breathe.
Wow. Did you tell anyone?
Oh my gosh. I told everyone I could after that. My therapist and I just cried. And I told my husband and I told my kids. And can I just tell you a little side note going
Yes.
along with this story?
Mhm.
I am a nurse and I have worked at a hospital for 15 years. And again, this is right after COVID. And so I had thought about quitting nursing, but I was praying at the same time going through this trauma therapy that the Lord would lead me to a ministry in nursing. And I really honestly thought it was going to be with the homeless people because that's where I thought my heart was. And I prayed and prayed and prayed. And 2 days after this healing session, the Lord, he said to me, I want you to work for a crisis pregnancy center. And I was like, what? What do you mean? And also, I am a women's Bible study co-leader, and my co-leader is the executive administrator of our church. And her and I were meeting the next day for lunch. And so we're sitting there, and she says, Dawn, she goes, this came across the church fax this morning, and the Lord told me I need to get this to you. And I'm like, okay. She handed it to me. It was a job opening for a nurse sonographer for a crisis pregnancy center. And I work there as of today and have been for almost 2 years now.
Wow.
So I get to work with women who are contemplating having abortions. And I have shared my story with a couple of them. I'm not there to manipulate. I'm there to just give their options and show them their baby. But the Lord has really blessed me through that. And I get to pray for these women, to help them with their decisions or to help them just make the right decision. And they all don't
Yeah.
make the right decision. But I feel so blessed and honored to be able to pray for them and just wish maybe there would have been one person who could have prayed for me back when I was 16.
Mhm. You know, your story is incredible, and it's such a powerful testimony. The flip side, and I'm sure this is not lost on you, is that because of the contentiousness of this issue politically,
Mm,
there are people who will not like your story,
right.
right?
Hmm.
What do you think is missing from the conversations that you hear surrounding this issue?
I see the biggest missing thing is 1 out of 4 women in church have had an abortion, and that affects 1 out of 4 men as well. And I don't think it's talked about enough in the church.
Mm.
I think there needs to be an awareness of options for women. Like, one of the biggest stumbling blocks for me is when we talk about the options of parenting, adoption with these women. They have such a stigma about adoption that they'd rather do the abortion than put their baby up for adoption. So I think as a church, we need to do better at talking about these issues in the church and supporting these women who are sitting in the pews for 40 years with pain and shame, thinking that the Lord will not forgive them when indeed He will and
Yeah.
has.
Yeah. I mean, what does freedom feel like now after so many years of of carrying this, of it always being, just kind of tucked away, maybe not top of mind, but always there? What does freedom feel like?
Oh my gosh, it is so light. Like, I was just telling you, my child would have been 40 this year. Back in the day, if I would have said that, I would have just felt so heavy and so burdened. Now I'm like, you know what? The Lord has had my child for the last 40 years, and I will see that child again someday. And it'll be a good reunion. But it's freedom. It's really light.
So what would you say to the woman who's listening who maybe doesn't have that freedom yet and is still carrying around a lot of shame? Maybe she's in church, maybe she doesn't know the Lord. What would you say?
For the ones that are in church and know the Lord, please just put your trust in Him that He does still love you and that He does forgive you. And even for the woman who's not in church or may not be a Christian, that pain that you're feeling can be released. It can be freed if you would just go to that spot and let the Lord just take that pain for you. Without that freedom, you feel like you're stuck under a rock or a boulder and you just can't push it up. And then when you finally do have that boulder lifted off, it's such a freedom.
That's just so beautiful.
Thank you.
And I'm so grateful that the Lord revealed to you the truth,
Me too.
because there's so many. I think this applies to a lot of different areas, even as I think obviously abortion is a big one, but I think a lot of us have things that feel kind of untouchable,
Hmm.
you know, that are like you're free in all these other areas, but this little corner.
Hmm.
And so I think that this principle applies to more people than we even might realize. Snapshot Testimony is a Moody Radio podcast. I'm your host, Allie Domerson, and together we're sharing the moments that shape a life of faith in Christ. Thanks for listening.